Today we have the creative minds behind Haus, a modern take on the aperitif customized for how we gather today, meaning more hangouts and less hangovers. That seems to be a theme on this one. I like that.
Yeah.
Dreamt up by Helena Price Hambrecht, a Silicon Valley creative, and Woody Hambrecht, a third-generation winemaker. Haus is made with only real ingredients from their farm in Sonoma County. I can't wait to go visit their farm and do a show there.
Yeah.
In addition to coming up with seasonal flavors, they are keeping busy these days with their latest endeavor, the Restaurant Project. Collaborating with restaurants across America, they are co-creating aperitifs and passing 100% of the profits back to the restaurants. In their first 2 weeks alone, they were able to send $50,000 to their partners. Now, here to tell us more about this and their other exciting projects are Helena and Woody.
All right,
let's bring them on.
Here we go. And there we go.
There we go. Hi guys, welcome.
Hi, how are you?
Good to see you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about where you are? I think you might be just around the corner.
Welcome to our warehouse. We have a beautiful, neatly organized assortment of boxes behind us, full of alcohol. We are actually just down the street from you guys in Healdsburg. It's the first time we've ever been on a Zoom with people also in Healdsburg. It's a big moment.
That's amazing. Well, actually, I'm going to let you talk about your new project, but before I do that, I'm going to tell you a secret about how we first came to, this is not our first Zoom call with you.
Oh, really?
Dun, dun, dun. Believe it or not, you were, as the pandemic arrived, you guys were our very first Zoom cocktail hour.
Oh,
we're doing it.
Because on the Friday night, you were doing a Zoom and you had all the tiles on the screen. We even got promoted to a panelist at one point as our friend Zach was coming. We were about to go for our own sort of cocktail hour before social distancing was put into place, but you were the first ones, and I think of you as the spark that inspired the terrible movement of Zoom cocktail hours. Because I don't know about you, but there's nothing worse than sitting on a cocktail hour for probably your family, and even though my family's on this particular one, I see you, but where you're there and they're like, how do I get on the Zoom? How do I do this? And then you have to go through the whole thing where everybody comments on their sort of thesis on what's going to happen in a post-COVID world. And then you have to listen to people who you're like, aren't you reading the New York Times? Are we all getting the same news source? Why is this speculation? So thank you for that gift you have given to society, which is the Zoom-based hangout. And thank you for joining us on the show today.
Thank you for having us. Yeah, that was our first foray into the online happy hour, and it's definitely not the same as drinking in person, but it'll have to do for a while, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you guys are doing a ton of great projects. Why don't you tell us about the newest one, which is launching today?
Yeah, good timing for this event. We just launched the second round of releases for our restaurant project. And to take a step back for those of you who don't know about this project, when the pandemic hit, we were one of the businesses that were lucky to see growth, as a lot of alcohol companies are and direct-to-consumer companies are during this time. And so we wanted to take a step back and think about how we could use our resources to help others in food and beverage who are not doing so well, the worst faring being restaurants. And so long story short, we ended up partnering with now 13 of some of the best chefs in America, restaurants that we love, that we've been going to for many years, and we're making aperitifs with them. And the way that this is helpful to them now is they're able to, execute their vision into alcoholic form. We sell it on the internet, and we're giving all of the profits to them, which is a pretty penny. So it's allowed us to make an immediate impact on them at a time when they have really no means of collecting revenue. So it's been really exciting. And today we launched 4 new restaurants, including Momofuku, which is, they're the kind of earliest, most innovative restaurant we can think of in terms of pursuing alternative forms of revenue. So it's been a really exciting moment for us, and for you getting to work with some of the best chefs in America.
Yeah, it's been incredible. And what's been amazing, so Helena mentioned we have roughly a dozen of these restaurants. What's been so cool is that each flavor is so different. Each chef, like, I was really worried that everyone was going to kind of have a similar profile, but really just without much, we didn't really have to like handhold anybody. Everyone's vision was totally different, and it's been really cool. But they're so good.
That's really exciting in terms of like, how do you, from a process perspective, engage with the chef to sort of get that? Because obviously it's a little bit like their inspiration and then your execution. How do you kind of guide them through that top part of the process?
Yeah, so, I think, we gave them samples of what we're doing so they could kind of understand what Haus is. And then we took a meeting and talked through some of their inspiration, some of the flavors that they like. And from there, we just distilled down to like anywhere from half a dozen to a dozen flavors that they think taste good together, that is a good representation of their restaurant. And then from there, we make individual tinctures. So we make essentially different flavorings of each one of these flavors that they've called out. And then we start mixing them, changing the ratios, seeing what has more tannin, more mouthfeel. And it's really just kind of a R&D dance that we do back here. Then we ship them samples and they say, we like it, we don't like it, more of this, more of that. And what's been cool, and again, like another surprise, is this process has gone by really quickly. So for the most part, we really understood their vision. We're able to execute it pretty quickly.
That's amazing.
All right. Well, you guys look like you have houses.
I know.
Do you call them houses? Is that the plural?
I'm not sure we've ever come across that question.
You have houses in front of you.
Well, they'll have an answer to that next time.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
We think we should join you for the wind down. I'm gonna pull out
here to choose from.
Yeah. Part of what I wanted to highlight was, I think you guys do such a great job of this DTC, like when we get it, the experience, like when we get it shipped to us, it feels like, like an Apple product, right? It's like, the awesome.
It feels better than an Apple product.
Yeah, the unboxing experience, the packaging experience. So we'll open this up and then.
While you're doing that, I love this.
Thank you.
I love the feel of the paper because it's so like soft and textural.
Oops.
It just has a nice, good feel to it.
Thank you.
And I'm assuming a lot of this is personal and you.
It's very much an extension of us. It's us showing people who we are.
Yeah.
We'd like an invite to this party.
Hey.
Promise we'll look better. We'll dress up.
All right, so I've got the bitter clove here, but for anyone who's watching, a jumping off point would be wine. Haus is a aperitif, wine based, but would you just walk us through a little bit about exactly what Haus is?
Chef?
Oh, I don't know. I feel like.
Oh my God. Well, aperitifs have been a thing in Europe for a very long time, over 100 years. They're a mainstay of drinking over there. Aperitifs you may be familiar with are Aperol, famous for the Aperol Spritz, Campari, what you may find in Negroni. They are low ABV. They're, anywhere from a third to half the alcohol that you'd find in a whiskey, vodka, or gin, but they are typically still considered in the liquor category. So you would either sip them on the rocks or would use them as a base of a cocktail. And we, wanted to take that category of alcohol that's really been an old world category. There hasn't been a ton of innovation there. Even Aperol is quite old. And put a Californian spin on it. And how did you do that, Woody?
Ooh, well, I think the essence of a lot of these aperitifs, these old world products, are, they really showcase the ingredients in where they're made. So that's really how we started was, we have all these beautiful botanicals and flowers and fruits grown on our ranch. Let's first start working with those. And then, one thing led to another and our flavors developed. But that was truly the inspiration.
Yeah. So these first two products that we released, the citrus flower and the bitter clove, which you're drinking now, those were actually heavily inspired by old world aperitifs from Europe. The citrus flower being inspired by Bianco vermouths, elderflower liqueurs, you know, citrusy like limoncellos. And then the bitter clove was inspired by the Amaro category, but the American drinker doesn't necessarily have the same palate for that super bitter, super sweet kind of Amaro experience that you would get from a traditional aperitif.
Yeah, and we also wanted something that you could really, you know, I like sitting and sipping on a brown liquor, on a whiskey or something. But we were also looking at something where you could replace that experience, but have much less of the alcohol. So an Amaro, you know, you could argue that you can do that with an Amaro, but really they're so viscous, so sweet that you can kind of really, I can have like a glass of Amaro and I'm usually pretty good. But I love the flavor profile and the essence. So we basically broke that down, deconstructed it, and then made the bitter clove into something that, you know, has a lot of those characteristics, but something you can really kind of sip on over an evening.
So what's hilarious about that, I mean, maybe not hilarious, depending on who's watching. If my mom was watching, because she thinks everything I say is funny. But what's actually interesting is I love the clove, as we were talking about, and I am a huge Amaro fan. I mean, you're basically taking me back to Italy right now, where I'm definitely not going this summer. And sadly, the flight has been canceled. It's all canceled. But I love Amaro. And as time goes on, you're like, it's so sweet. It's actually fairly high in alcohol. It's not as low in alcohol as the others, right? And I've caught myself with an Amaro hangover the next day. And so I never put the two and two together, but I think that's what was inspired.
Well, what I found interesting was when we discovered Haus, was, you know, we went through a phase, you know, maybe 2 summers ago, last summer, we were drinking a lot of Aperol, not necessarily Aperol spritzes like Aperol and soda, but we were deliberately, or I was deliberately trying to drink less alcohol and, you know, find something that you could have a little bit of, you know, you feel like you're having a drink, but lower alcohol. But then you're going to Aperol, and then you find out that it's loaded with sugar and loaded with, you know, artificial colors and all this sort of stuff. And you're like, okay, this stuff's kind of junk too, right? So you're like, this was sort of checking all the boxes. It's like a nice low alcohol, it has all the flavor, and then, but it's, you know, everything's very, you know, natural. It's not a bunch of added ingredients.
Yeah, we've done the lab tests on a bunch of our kind of, you know, similar aperitifs, and Aperol has 8 times the sugar that we do.
Okay.
The closest that we found was Lillet, and that has double the sugar that we do.
Still, there you go.
Yeah. So. And yeah, I mean, it's orange. it's not anymore.
Yeah.
You know, it's and you know, we talk about this a lot, like alcohol's just gotten a pass for a long time, and it's amazing that it's an entire industry that has very little scrutiny, and you know, we as consumers are questioning where our food comes from, where our beauty products come from. We're applying that scrutiny to every other industry that we purchase from, and alcohol is just kind of, it's gotten this pass because it's a vice. And but when in reality, there's a whole spectrum of how good or bad a vice can be, right? It doesn't mean you need to be drinking McDonald's when you could be drinking something that is more Michelin star, right? Like, there is a range.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had a friend of ours runs a natural wine business, and sort of like curates monthly shipments from natural wine producers. And so she obviously talks about that whole notion of like, you know, whole, like, I call them the yummy mummy audience of like, you know, we care about everything that like goes into our bodies and our children's and everything like that. And then we're like, good. And they're like, you know, I wouldn't want to spend more than $12 on a bottle of wine from the grocery store. And you're kind of like,
doesn't work that way.
We head scratch that for a second. So I think there's that piece of it, which is an interesting side of the trend.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. Let's just shift a little bit to business, if you will, because we're sort of in the lifestyle business discussion. One of the cool things about your story is, you you know, coming together, but also, I mean, you guys raised venture level financing, which is really challenging, especially for a spirit brand. And, you know, tell us a little bit about how you did that and what advice you have for folks, because I think it's super cool. And I'm sure you got a lot of questions and challenges, but you overcame them, obviously.
Oh yeah, I mean, check by check, you know, it was small check by small check. It probably took us, I mean, it took us 6 months to get anyone to write us a check.
Yeah, we thought we were going to be fully funded by Thanksgiving 2018.
$0.
$0. We didn't get our first check until
January
of 2019.
Yeah.
And it was a $20,000 check.
Yeah, I mean, the first check was definitely nice to receive. It went straight to Jen Lane, who we'd already agreed to work with, even though we couldn't afford them.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a lot of chicken and egg, you know, it was, and we're a different startup from most in that, you know, a lot of startups are quite nimble. They're either software or they're direct to consumer company that outsources all production. So they're just kind of like a lean front of office. It's a consumer brand. It's a customer experience. And that's where the money goes. It goes into growth. Yep. And for us, we made the decision to own all of our infrastructure, partially because we already were doing that with the aperitifs and wine that Woody was making prior to Haus. So it wasn't a huge lift, but we wanted to own that process. And that's not normal for most companies that are pitching for venture capital. So when you're pitching and you're saying, you know, most of this money is going to infrastructure, that's not great news for an investor, right? Because they don't even have proof of product market fit yet. So it was not easy. And we ultimately ended up getting checks from people who just deeply, like the problem that we were talking about, deeply resonated with them. They just kind of got it, you know, and it took us time to find those people because there were, rightly so, many people who just could pick it apart and be like, this isn't how it's done, you know, and we're like, yeah, we know, but we're going to do it this way. And eventually it got, you know, to the point where we would, you know, tell some people who are hovering, you know, okay, well, we're going to do these things. And they're like, okay, we'll come back when you did them. And we come back and say, oh, well, here we did the thing. And they're like, cool, to show us when you do the next thing. And it was goalpost after goalpost, but we did all the things. And one conversation I remember very clearly is, you know, we managed to raise $1 million right around the week that we launched in total. And again, check by check. And then we raised another 1.25 that week that we launched it, just, you know, in 2 days. And one of the folks who came in that second close was like, look, you know, people come to us every day telling us all of these great ideas and these great visions, but they don't do it. Like most people just don't do the things that they say that they're going to do. And you did every single thing that you said you were going to do. And we're sorry we didn't come in, you know, at the first cap. But, you know, we trust you now and we like see that you do what you say you're going to do. So I think for us, it was, you know, like it was hard, but ignorance is bliss, right? If we'd known how hard it was, it'd be a little more daunting.
Yeah.
I think we're like,
you're on, right?
Our optimism really carried us. Because we were just convinced that we could do it. And eventually it happened.
That whole adage, investors invest in lines, not dots, you know, that by demonstrating each time you come back that you're making progress and that you're doing what you say you're going to do, you know, people are getting on board. You wish they'd get on board the first time you tell them, because you're like, hey, it's me. I'm going to definitely do this. But
yeah, I also think it's a lesson for folks around the idea that not every investor is going to be a good match. And sometimes the most important thing as an entrepreneur is to know when to say no. And to know that just because there are I think fundraising is a great exercise in mentor whiplash if you let it be. Because everybody can tell you all the things you should do about your business. And sometimes it's about sort of staying true to yourself in terms of what you actually want to do. And then you can pull off a hat trick like many of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, to that point, you know, we've raised, our last total close was $4.5 million. And, you know, I think our biggest check in that round was $300K, you know, it's a party round. And I think there's a lot of people who think that that's, you know, a bad idea or a bad signal or whatever. And obviously it started out of necessity because no one would give us a check over $25,000. But over time, we found that it actually worked great for us. One, to the point that you just made, we didn't want anyone with too much of a share in our company because we didn't trust anyone to know how to build this business more than us. So we didn't want to have that power dynamic. And then more than anything, we ended up with this incredible network of hype men and women who had all of the connections that we could ever want, right? It's like, oh, we're going into wholesale, like 10 of our investors invest in great restaurants across America. Oh, we want to go, you know, partner with hotels. Oh yeah, okay, we have an investor who knows the owner of every hotel in America. You know, it's like we're 1 degree away from everybody we could ever want to meet because we have this amazing cap table who didn't invest for the wrong reasons. They truly just invested because they believed in it and they're excited about it and they love the product. So it's ended up being a good situation.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you back into good, I mean, I'm sure that was your strategy from the get-go. You were like, you know what, I want to manage a lot of relationships with investors and fight tooth and nail for a $25,000 check. And then in the end, we're all sort of like, or someone could just take the whole round. And we've been in a situation where we had a potential investor who was like, maybe he could just take the whole round, And then you find out you're like, and I can sell my soul to the devil because he's a jackass. Yeah, and I think, you know, it's interesting. We don't know the right strategy until we're actually in the game.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. It's all exactly the right idea after you've already done it, right?
Well, congratulations. But I think it's interesting. One of the interesting pieces is that you also are, well, you're bringing this sort of like very hyper local approach to the winemaking and the infrastructure, and probably doesn't feel like a Valley investment. Your background gives you a little bit of a Silicon Valley mentality. And how are you kind of bringing that to bear in the work that you're doing and how you're actually approaching kind of customer acquisition and those sort of pieces? And even the unboxing, right? That comes from real commitment to brand from the very beginning.
Yeah, I mean, it truly, we joke, Haus exists because a techie married a winemaker. You know, it's like Woody has this deep generational experience in the industry, which gives us so much competitive advantage over supply chain, over sourcing, over production, compliance. Like Woody's our secret sauce on the, you know, actual product side. And then, you know, for me, it was kind of seeing how things had been done in the industry forever and being like, why is this done this way? This doesn't make much sense. Cheers.
Cheers.
You know, and really asking those hard questions of like, why isn't it cool to build a big brand? Or why is it so hard to build one even if you wanted to? Or what is selling out as an independent brand? And like, why is that stigma there? You know, it's like, I think me just being a total outsider, I mean, like I bartended, but that's as close as I got to working in the alcohol industry.
Bless you.
I think it took an outsider kind of asking those hard questions and being like, well, why does it have to be done this way? Why does the bottle have to look like that? Why is every booze bottle the same? Why isn't alcohol being sold online? Why are these like liquor executives telling us that no one will buy alcohol online? Like, why are all of these things happening? And so, you know, for us, it's really that balance of like taking what works, and Woody knows what works, you know, deeply from a supply chain and product standpoint, and taking those values to make the best product possible and the best kind of, you know, fulfillment experience, all of that. Like that is Woody's expertise. And then for me, coming in and just asking those foundational questions of like, if we reinvented packaging for today's generation, what would it be, right? Or if we invented the online buying experience of alcohol, what would that be? What does the brand need to look like? What purpose does education serve? Where can we instill that in every touch point? Like all of that, you know, is something that it doesn't seem like it had really been asked in this business before. So yeah, it's a team effort.
Well, you're doing a great job, and it is interesting because you have had a big vision around it. I mean, that seems like, I don't know if it was deliberate or if you know, one thing that investors always ask is, you know, how big can this get, right? And what's disruptive about this?
Don't you fucking hate the TAM slide?
And you kind of, you get those questions, right? And this is an industry, whether it's wine or liquor, and they traditionally have been very separate. And I think you talked about this, but they follow, it's highly regulated. There's all sorts of things about, sales and distributorships and that type of thing. And you guys have kind of, put a wedge through that, in that, because of the ABV, you've been able to hit a point, create a product that actually is hitting a need, like, what I'm looking for, low alcohol, but, natural and taste, great flavors, but also that you can sell online and go direct consumer, build, sort of own your own, not need distribution, own your own customer relationship. I mean, that is a potentially very, very big company, right? If you want it to be big. I don't, if you're raising money, you have to want it to be somewhat big, because those investors want to return. But was that sort of thinking and positioning deliberate around, hey, we want a direct relationship. We want to sort of, weave through this regulation in the industry and still create a great product that we can get to people, and we think that can be very big.
Oh yeah. I mean, when we had the moment of like, why the hell is there not a Glossier Way Everlane for alcohol? And Woody being like, oh, there's a loophole that I've never thought about until this moment. And like, that was a moment when it was like, oh, this is $1 billion idea. And, not just from a, like, let's follow the Luxottica pre-Warby Parker narrative and go and build the first alcohol portfolio that represents our generation and go eat the lunch of corporate alcohol. But there's a lot there, right? It's like, we've been able to bypass a system that doesn't want us to exist, right? It's right. Like, it's a 3-tier system. It's largely owned by corporate brands. They're all in cahoots. The laws that were designed to protect from a monopoly created a monopoly. You have no leverage unless you're owned by a corporation. And by going direct, we don't have to worry about any of those gatekeepers. Like the Diageo that would have to choose whether or not to invest in us and then make us legitimate to a distributor. We don't have to worry about that. The distributor that doesn't know whether or not they need another aperitif, we don't have to worry about that. The beverage director that feels like their bar is already stocked, we don't have to worry about that. We just were focused on making products for the drinker, and the drinker had a problem and we solved it. And so in that way, we were able to just start this business 10 miles ahead of any other independent brand, because we were just able to sell to the drinker and create leverage through customer relationships. And now that we're going into wholesale, and now that we're, talking to distributors in other states and talking to restaurants, because, to be a big brand, you need to be where other brands are. Ultimately, we have leverage that we didn't have before. Yeah. And it's customer demand.
Yeah, we have the customer demand. And what's also unique about our model is we also know where our customers are. We know their zip codes. Large liquor companies are spending millions of dollars every year on Nielsen reports. And, we have that in our POS system. It's, it's incredible.
Genius. I have 2 questions for you on that, which was, one, what is the leading market for Haus?
California as a state is our biggest state for sure.
We generally do focus on great products here in California, so that would make sense.
A lifestyle state. New York as well. New York's a huge market for us. They may be our biggest city.
Nice.
And I mean, our hypothesis was that our initial market was similar to us, right? Career focused, early adopter. They have a certain brand sensibility. They have a certain standard for product quality. They're willing to pay $35 for a bottle, and they're drinking a lot. It's not for the person who's trying to go sober. It's not for the person who's keto. It's for a drinker. But they're looking for a much better quality product than what they're drinking. And they're looking to have a more sustainable lifestyle where they don't feel like shit every day. Yeah. And those are in cities.
That's interesting. The other piece is that you said 2 things. At the beginning, we were talking a little bit about how there's no control over sort of the ingredients and things like that in alcohol, whereas other things, where we're obviously choosing much better products. But what's interesting about that is I think you're right. Obviously you're right. On the monopoly side, there's all of these rules.
Yeah.
around alcohol that are actually designed to make sure that we line the pockets, right, of the state regulators, of the distributor, of the sub-distributor, of the salesperson, and the alcohol company, and the Diageos. And so there's all these like taxes and controls around that, which are controls around how we slice up the penny, not controls that actually support the consumer. And so I think it's a fascinating subject. And as DTC alcohol comes up, how do you think, you know, people will obviously get on the train, and just as we've seen in sort of like weed, where we saw we saw PAX turn into Juul, turn into like $15 billion
Right.
with the founder, which is amazing, but also create like a real problem from a consumer health perspective. What do you think is going to happen in spirits and wine as DTC becomes more prevalent? Because in wine, I've seen it where they have these like terrible products that, you know, like I know that they're terrible, and they use quizzes where they're like, what's your chocolate flavor? And you're like, white chocolate or dark chocolate. And then based on that, they're like, you would love this jammy Cabernet Sauvignon blend we've created for you from grapes we've bought through third parties at a discount, right? It's not like quality products. So how do you think that's going to play out?
There's going to be a reckoning for sure, not just in alcohol, but like across all CPG. Like I think we're reaching a point of brand fatigue that we've even experienced the side effects of, where people saw Haus's branding, it's slick, it's like different, and they assumed that our product sucked.
Yeah.
And that we're another company that invested everything in brand. We're totally phony. We probably just, you know, went to Stanford and had this idea in class, and we got venture capital, and we're just selling water for $35. We get that, you know, we get those comments on our Facebook ads, we get stuff like that. And that skepticism exists for a reason. I mean, it exists because there are so many companies that went and raised venture capital, gave it all to Gin Lane or Red Antler, made a beautiful brand, didn't invest the same in the product or the customer experience. And then you end up with brands that are disappointing, that look beautiful. And so it's a crowded market in terms of brand. And I think there's going to be a reckoning probably now, you know, where people are trying these products and they're finally deciding like what is legit and what isn't. And people are also learning to ask those questions. And I think venture capitalists will also start to ask those questions more versus like, oh, you know how to play the game, so I feel confident giving you my money because you'll go and sell this. I think it's going to be more of, oh, like, do you have a co-founder that has domain expertise here? Like, oh, like, how are you actually making this product? Is this actually going to stand up? Do you have retention in mind? Like, I think those are more of the questions that founders have to ask themselves now. And I think hopefully it would be smart for venture capitalists to ask those questions as well in the future.
Yeah, I also feel like, I mean, venture capitalists tend to jump on the trend, ride it, and then jump off the trend as quickly as they do, and then point to all the failures or the successes and be brilliant in whichever way they would like to be. And, you know, I've been on the bad side of the world. So I'm part of the problem. So one of the things that I would say, though, is that's interesting is, and that is probably a good reason to raise venture capital at this time, is if you are a brand that is starting to break new ground like DTC, the thing that differentiates great brands from brands that die are delivering on the promise that's being made, right? So the first purchase of Haus, once I get that delivery of that great experience and I love the product, that creates product love. And actually in a time where so many brands are putting their efforts into brand and experience, and it's easy, and I'm not going to pick on your Apple example, but like, I remember back in the Google days, they were like, it was even the Mini Cooper, we need to create the employee kit that looks like the Mini Cooper experience. And you're like, I mean, it's an employee kit. Does anyone really give a fuck? And so at some point, and I was like, I really care. But at some point, the brand experience has to match the promise that's being delivered. And I think it's very easy to be like, I'll just copy the Apple experience and then that makes me a great product. But the great product actually has to follow. So I think that's the message to the audience is that, you know, invest in the brand, but equally invest in the product, because you won't have a return customer if your product sucks.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I was just having this conversation earlier today with a couple of Stanford students who are doing research on functional beverages, and something that they're seeing just in their research alone is that, you know, it's a crowded market already, and a lot of these functional beverages are advertising like, oh, collagen or turmeric or whatever the benefit might be, but the actual amount of that product in the can or the bottle is negligible. Like there's not even close to enough to have any effect on somebody, and I think that kind of scrutiny is going to begin as well, right? Where it's like it used to just be about, like, it was truly about having a good looking brand in your hand. And that was the main motivator for a lot of people. It was social signaling. It was saying like, I take care of myself, and this bottle shows you that. But now I think there's going to be a greater scrutiny of like, how much is in here? Like, is there enough? Like, what's the dose? Like, it's that I don't feel any different. Like, what's happening here? Why am I spending $12 on this bottle?
Against the benefit.
Right. So yeah, I think it's still super nascent. Like, this whole industry is very nascent in terms of people kind of leading the way in terms of transparency. There's that step one of like, oh, we have an active ingredient that's good for you. And the next step is like, these are nutrition facts. And these are like, this is actually how much of everything is in here. And like, you're going to feel a certain way, and we can guarantee that.
That's cool. We saw the Odwalla truck driving by, and we were like, God, doesn't that seem like such a throwback brand now? When they used to be like, look at all the fruits that we put into the thing, and you're like, 90 grams of sugar? Like, remember when Odwalla seemed to be like this like health trend?
Oh, I mean, I'm from North Carolina. I'm from a food desert. So to me, like, oh my God, the things that I thought was healthy, like Lean Pockets.
Yeah.
Where in North Carolina?
New Bern. It's like a little town near the coast.
We're my family's from Wilmington.
No.
Right to the beach.
No.
Yeah, that's where we're RVing across America in August.
Oh, that's awesome.
Hopefully, if we're able to, but because otherwise we won't see our family.
Yep.
And so we're gonna head to Wrightsville for.
Oh, I'm jealous.
Sounds terrible, doesn't it?
I love a redneck beach.
Authentic brand, Sundrop, a classic North Carolina brand.
Used to drink it for hydration.
Right.
I remember it well.
I mean, brought the sun for you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah.
All right.
All right. Well, let's shift gears. I think I know I don't know, 10 minutes left or so. What's it like to work as a husband and wife?
Perfect.
Every day.
It's great. I think it's great. And specifically in our instance, our roles are so clearly defined, that we include each other in all of our decisions, but like, I'm product, she's brand, so there's not much.
We each have our own domains,
Yeah.
Like if we were both art directors, like we'd be divorced by now probably, but like he runs like his domain, and he truly knows best. He didn't just pick it up when we started Haus. And, I do comms and customer experience and brand. And so, but we're both stubborn. So we're not kind of blindly saying yes to each other either, right? If Woody has an idea around product, or I have an idea around something else, like a campaign, like we're not gonna, like, we can't just say, we're gonna do this. I have to bring him a proposal. He needs to bring me a proposal. We like really do have to kind of debate the merits of it.
Yeah.
And so like, that's one way where our mutual stubbornness actually works in our favor.
And we also have a business coach who essentially is a couples therapist.
Peter,
his
he's
name's
wonderful.
Peter, incredible guy. And honestly, I think I couldn't recommend that more to co-founders also. I think there's just like having a mediator to help discuss conflicts, friction. It's super important. And honestly, I'm not like someone who was opposed to therapy or anything like that, but it wasn't something that I openly was really looking for, I don't think, in this sort of relationship. But we've found it to be just incredibly valuable.
That's interesting. And I mean, we could probably use that.
Maybe we should focus on our individual domains. I roll.
You can make it work. You can make it work.
Yeah.
Like, I think for us, like, we both of us, we were attracted to each other because like we were both so career focused. Like Woody's whole life revolved around his work. My whole life revolved around our work. So we kind of like moved at the same speed, through the world. So that helped a lot, I think, because like our house is our life, like Woody right now is in the warehouse from like 8 a.m. to 2 a.m. every day right now. And
this restaurant project has put a little bit of work on my plate.
Yeah, that's what happens when you launch 13 flavors in a month.
Yeah.
And like I have that same kind of like workaholic, don't know how to turn it off kind of mode. And so, it has its disadvantages, but I think like, I don't think we know how to do it any other way. So that helps.
Yeah, it's interesting when we we've debated these things, and we've often been hit as through investors, right? So it's always great lessons. But we had an investor who said, I don't see a lot of people would be concerned that you guys are married, and that would bring up a lot of issues. And he was like, I don't really see that here, and it's not a red flag for me. And I said, well, I think people misunderstand that, like, if you're co-founding a company with someone, that's, actually in a lot of ways harder than being married to someone, because you're in it and it's very difficult to get out. And I said, but the other thing is that if you have married co-founders, the one thing that does work in your favor is our goals are very, very aligned.
Totally.
Yes.
And oftentimes in partnerships, and you've had your share of partnerships that you're like, what am I going to do with these? Because all of a sudden the partners are totally misaligned.
Yes.
And so then the company actually suffers. Whereas like
We're
all in. We call it all in. The only option is nuclear. Like literally there is no other option.
Yes.
Yeah, totally agree with you.
So many incentives to make it work.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like we're married, we have a child. Like there are so many more reasons to make this work than just getting fed up and walking away,
Although sometimes I do just like to throw up my hands and say, I quit, you try and do this without me.
Yeah.
We've been there.
Yeah.
I mean, one really interesting thing that I heard from an investor a long time ago, kind of early in the process, because we got a little bit of that. Someone was like, oh, what they actually mean is they don't like that you two are so aligned that no one will ever have any true leverage over the company.
Right.
That's interesting. That's very interesting, because investors do ultimately, seek a little bit of control, or seek, so yeah, nobody's ever going to get in between you.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
No, that is a good point. And that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good litmus test, right? Like
they're always looking for one, the couples therapist wants leverage too. They're looking for the person who is going to move. Investors are like, they're looking for the founder who's willing to move, and then they can work their angles.
Look for the cracks. And, I mean, we didn't check like any of the boxes that are like, that an investor necessarily looks for, right? Like we're not Ivy League. We're not experienced startup founders. We're married. We had a 3-month-old baby. We had a few things working against us. And, it ultimately ended up being a great litmus test, because like anyone who would truly believe that we weren't capable based on any of those things, we were like, okay, we don't need you on our cap table. Yeah. That's okay. There are we just always had the mentality of like, there is so much wealth in the world. There's a lot of poverty too, but there's so much wealth in the world, and we will find the money. Like we believe that we're building something that will resonate with a lot of people. Certainly there's an overlap between those people and people who have enough money to invest in us. We will find them. And so, yeah, it just took more time, but we found them.
That's amazing.
That's great.
We have a theme that we talk about called work-life integration, because we think as entrepreneurs, work-life balance is bullshit, and work-life integration is actually what ends up happening, right? That bleeding between the two lives. How do you guys manage that?
I don't know.
Right now, we're not.
We?
I mean, I think when we launched the restaurant project, I told Helena that we discussed this, that basically she wouldn't see me for 6 weeks.
Which is not true, because I'm in the warehouse almost every day.
That's true. Yeah.
But
I mean,
we just
and
work.
Flows, but yeah,
we just work.
But we're attracted. I mean, that's something that makes us more attracted to each other. That drive, the dedication to the company. We're building something incredible together.
It's also our life's work. Like everything that Woody has done and I have done have like literally led to this moment of Haus. And it's what we want to do. When people are like, well, what would you do if you had like, you know, tons of wealth already? We would want to do Haus. Like this is the most exciting thing that either of us have ever done in our life. Yeah. And so we're super motivated, even though we're tired, right? Like even the restaurant project, like our whole team is so motivated right now because it's such a cool thing to be working on. Yeah. And so I think if it got to a point where we felt we'd hit a ceiling or we were bored, then that would be a problem. But there's just like, I think both of us are really comfortable when there's like a sheer rock wall in front of us that we have to, you know, free solo. Yeah. And like, we're faced with that almost every day. And I think we both get in our element when we're in that zone. Like if we were just sitting on a plateau, we'd be depressed and having anxiety attacks. But we're good as long as there's like clearly something challenging for us to figure out.
Yeah, totally agree with that.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, you hear the passion coming through from you guys, and I think that's sort of what work-life integration is. It's when you're following your life's work, as you said, you know, something that you really care about, really dedicate. Then it is work. Nicely. It's not that it's not work. It's hard. It's you know, challenging, but it's how you want to be spending your time, and you're sort of, you know.
I mean, that ultimately is the agency that entrepreneurship brings, right? And this is something that we're talking about as we think about recovery in a post-COVID world, which is for a lot of the cities across the country, we're seeing this explosion in vulnerable populations. And it's not just going to magically, like you saw it in the restaurant industry, right? Like that thing just day one, right? Day one were the layoffs. Right. We're seeing this massive explosion of a very vulnerable population in the most vulnerable cities. Mm-hmm. And the reality is the cavalry's not coming. No. It's not going back to normal. No. And as we were talking to a friend today, without innovation or entrepreneurship in these cities, there's not going to be a place to work. There's not going to be jobs. And so, you know, it's a time of reckoning. It's creates fear, but then there's also this moment from that to be able to say, like, what do I want my life work to be? And it's easier in hard times to try the entrepreneurial journey because like you're already down. You can't go much further. And so it's scary, but it's also it's part of the process. And so I think what we see is entrepreneurship is the way forward for our economy. Mm-hmm. And those of us who are lucky enough to be on that journey are the ones to help the others as they start it.
Yeah, there are problems to solve, right? Like there are many new problems that we just, you know, experience as a society. And for a certain kind of person, that's opportunity, right? If you're passionate enough to try and solve it.
Yep.
All right. Well, we know you guys have a hard stop at 5:20. So thank you so much for joining us today. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you.
We hope to have a drink in person.
Yeah. I think next time we'll do this in person.
Just mask up.
Yes. I know. We're not even a mile apart right now.
And your restaurants, we wanted to let you know, Compère Le Pain is our neighbor in New Orleans.
I was going to say, I figured you knew that place.
So we're literally, like you walk around the corner and that's, Compère Le Pain is our watering hole.
That's our lunch spot. Yeah.
Well, I hope that you have room in your, I hope you have a guest bedroom for us because we'll have to come down and do some R&D by eating that restaurant's food.
Someday we are talking about doing hopefully being able to pilgrimage back to Mardi Gras next year. So I don't know how old is your baby?
She just turned 2.
Oh, so we're 6 months behind.
Cool.
So we took Harper for her first Mardi Gras this year in February. Mm-hmm. And so she was like 14, whatever.
Kids
my God.
Mardi Gras is perfect for kids. It really is.
She literally every day plays Mardi Gras. That's what she does. She puts her hands up in the air. She screams. She has beads. We have like a big bag of beads and she like puts the beads on. She throws the beads.
Amazing.
She reads her New Orleans book. She points at the Mardi Gras parades. Like it was I can honestly say it's the best thing that has ever happened to her in her 18 months.
I believe it.
Yeah, I love New Orleans so much. I wouldn't I wouldn't be opposed to a house headquarters in
I know.
second
Woody's
headquarters
just
in New
looking for
Orleans.
an excuse to do part-time in New Orleans.
That's where our queue is. So we'd be happy to host you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Done and done.
All right. Cool.
All right.
Have
Well,
a great day.
thank,
Have a great day. Bye.
thanks for being on the wind
We're
down.
supposed to wrap it up. I'm
Bill.
sorry.
Helena and Woody Hambrecht of Haus have just announced the restaurant project. And so go look that up. The link to that will be in the bio under this video when you watch that online. Thanks so much for coming on with us, and we'll have you back on the show maybe when we can do it again in person.
Awesome. Sounds
Thanks.
good.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Take care.